Hello, plant friends. So, this is the last episode in Stephanie's series called Building Community. And in this episode, we talk about the Facebook plant group she helped build from the ground up that's based on the principles of community, tolerance, and responsible collecting. I am here with Steph, and Steph is one of the moderators for one of the most prominent Facebook plant groups in the Bay Area, Northern California.
For Bay Area, we're still a very small group. It's just local people.
You know, there are probably about 1 million plant groups on Facebook, and you have your own, and it's about within the Bay Area. Uh, on the smaller side, you said about like 1,500 members or so, but it seems like a very close knit and very well regarded group.
The Bay Area has a lot of local plant groups, and when my friend said that she noticed that there was a lack of a rare Facebook buy sell trade plant group in the Bay Area, she decided like, hey, let's create one. The group was very small, like it's pretty inactive. We didn't have a vision for it. We didn't know like what we wanted other than a space for people to be able to find plants and buy sell trade with each other. But last summer there was a lot of social justice issues being brought up, and we didn't want to ignore that. Bay Area is pretty progressive.
Yes.
Which feels good for us, feels good for me. And so my friend Kelly and I, we decided that we wanted this local Bay Area plant group to also reflect the values of anti-racism, anti-bigotry, pro-BLM, pro-LGBTQ community. We're buy-sell trading in person, and safety is a really big aspect of like possibly meeting another person in person or going to their home or somebody coming to your home and not wanting to feel as though that person might not value your existence. And there's a lot of marginalized people in the Bay Area, and we really wanted there to be a safe space on Facebook when it comes to rare plants for us to be able to do that.
What has been the hardest parts or the most unexpected parts or aspects of being a moderator of a group?
It's hard. It is really, really hard. People forget or they don't realize like this is an unpaid job. It's an unpaid volunteer job, but we live in a digital era where like instant gratification is needed, like, and accessibility. Like people want messages replied to ASAP, things like that. Yeah. And then the difficulties is like everyone's different. Like people have different backgrounds, different personalities, different forms of communication. So having all those human elements all together in one space, it's just a challenge to navigate all those different things, and it's outside of my comfort zone too. Since I'm more of an introverted person, having to deal with so many people and personalities, like it's a challenge for me. But I do enjoy it because I enjoy the joy that plants bring to other people.
It's a lot of work, a lot of hours, right? What was your estimate again? I think we.
Yeah. So I never really checked how much time I spent on my phone, but I would say the peak of me being on BART's Bay Area Rare Tropicals was in the fall, and my husband asked me to take a look at my phone statistics, which I've never done before ever, and I was on my phone 14 hours a day, and 12 hours of it was on Facebook. It was not sustainable, not healthy.
So 14 hours total, and how many hours on the?
Anywhere between 10 to 12.
10 to 12 hours on moderating a Facebook plant group for free.
And it's not because I needed to do it, it was also a choice. I think I'm pretty plugged into the group, and that's just my choice only. It's not like people are expecting that or demanding that of me. I really like to get to know people intimately. There's 1,500 people in my group. I practically know everyone by name.
The plant community in its current state is relatively new. Obviously plant hobbyists and planters, right, super old long hobby, but we're talking about plant digital media, social media, right? This hobby and this space is relatively new. And I think that as a community moderator, Facebook moderator, organizer, whatever you want to call it, that you are with your local group, and sure, plant influencer or whatever,
I don't
right?
know.
I think that there is a sort of leadership element that we can hopefully influence the community and the direction towards somewhere. Where do you think that, as a plant community, we can improve, or elements that you think that, uh, directions that we could head to be better?
It's a really great question, and there is something that has been on my mind recently. So my background in training and field education is in conservation biology.
Okay.
I'm a conservation scientist, and it's been on my mind for a really long time since I got into this hobby that the demand went up exponentially, and there wasn't a lot of supply enough to meet that demand, and ultimately there are some unsustainable parts of this hobby, and that's the part that like I would like to bring to light a little bit more and have people have information and be educated on it. There's no judgment or shaming for what people do. Like, I'm sure I have something in my collection, unbeknownst to me, that is a vulnerable plant species or may have been sourced not ethically or sustainably. Personally, I need to be doing more of the due diligence to find those things out and asking questions. It just needs to be brought to light a little bit more to the community, just to be like, hey, there's only one planet,
Yeah.
and there's only an infinite supply of some of these resources and these plants, and how can we be more of an ambassador to the environment and to the planet and to these plants so that like they'll still be there for future generations.
Do you have any recommendations on? It's hard. Like, I agree with you that there should be no shaming.
No shaming.
There should be no judgment. It's. I don't think that there are many of us, or much of us, that come out and say like, "Oh, I want a plant poached from the wild," right? That's not usually the approach,
Yeah.
right? We're just kind of like, "Oh, I really like that plant.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get it." I may not be doing my due diligence about how that plant was acquired, but it wasn't a malicious intent
Yeah.
on the part of the buyer.
Instagram is one of the reasons why some of these plants got really popular.
Yeah.
They're Instagram worthy shots, they're perfect shots, they're very aesthetically nice plants that you can like take a picture of and post on your feed, and you get a lot of likes and people are like, wow, what's this plant? And then that kind of increases demand for those plants. We can't stop that. It's the door's been open, it's
Right.
happening. As far as recommendations, I would say like putting it out there to just make people aware of. Like you said, no one's saying like I want a poached plant,
Right.
but just like even just saying it out there and putting it on their radar, like hey, some of these plants are vulnerable, and they might be like, oh, I didn't know. What I would like to do for my local group is to like maybe write up a guidelines of things to be considered about or watch out for, especially when it comes to importing plants.
Right.
I'd say importing maybe having the most pressure on those wild populations because they're coming from tropical countries where the economy might be that people really need the money and they just need to get these plants so that they can survive to
Yep.
feed their families,
Mhm.
you know, and there's also no judgment there, like people need to survive,
Yep.
right? But the demand is coming from us.
Yep. Yep.
So how do we put less demand and monetary value on these things that people would try to go out and take from the wild?
Yeah.
One thing is when it comes to importing plants, finding out who the vendor is and how they're sourcing their plants, asking around the plant community to find out about these vendors' reputation, whether or not they're ethical, and you see that their nursery is propagating these plants. And then another thing that we can do as a collector is instead of mass importing large quantities of plants for possibly the idea of resale and making a profit, buying a couple and then propagating yourself in your home if you have a larger greenhouse or something like that, and it puts less pressure on the wild populations of being continually harvested to be sold versus like you're now a grower and you kind of can just grow them sustainably yourself and increase the numbers that are domestic.
I feel like we should stop using the term rare as much. Maybe, probably a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there were plants that were really rare and they were very, very hard to get. And maybe like 1 or 2 or 3 sellers would have them. But now in a world where like so many people are on social media, so many sellers, a lot of plants aren't really rare. uh, even the quote unquote rarest plants. I bet you if like you're well connected or you talk to friends, you probably can name several people with that quote unquote rare plant. And I feel like using the term rare usually does imply one it implies there's a like a hype
Yes.
to that word, which is why on social media and YouTube and Instagram for sure we use that word all the time for to hype up the content or the post or whatever. Um, but in addition to the hype, there's also this connotation that that plant that if it is truly rare, um, collecting it may have a significant impact to the wild populations, right? So that's all. I have no other thought on that. It's not a complete thought.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying, that like in reality a lot of these plants aren't rare. The more appropriate word is they're in high demand, or they're desirable.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
an Monstera is not
It's not
rare.
rare, right.
There's infinite supply actually, but the people who have the supply are smartly holding on to them to kind of control the market value of them.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why there's so much high demand is because people want them.
Yeah.
They find them to be pretty and aesthetically pleasing, and a little bit of hype around that as well. So that's the demand. It's not rare.
Right.
It's highly desirable.
Right. Since there are no concrete answers, concrete right or wrong, I think it's good that just people have this just in their mindset to sort of do what they can.
Ultimately, it's about education, awareness, and just putting it on people's radars.
Right.
It's totally fair if you're like, I never even thought of that.
Right. Right.
Because that's not your field,
Right.
But if you kind of at least make that more accessible for people to think about, then it's a little bit less of an ignorant excuse of like, oh, ignorance is bliss. Like just put it on the radar. It's not a debate. It's not a right or wrong. What you are allowed to do or not allowed to do. It's just be a good person.
Right.
Think about being a good person to your fellow man and being a good person to your environment.
Right. Besides conservation awareness, are there any other directions or improvements you want the plant society to go? You mentioned that in your group you're big on social issues, right? BLM, LGBTQ, just like acceptance, tolerance. Yeah, you wanna.
Ultimately, what we want, hopefully, is that people can just become way more and more educated about conservation and about social justice issues. We are a plant group. We're not putting it out there to do the education, but what we ultimately want is a space where at least more like-minded people who feel strongly about human rights issues see it as human rights issues and not see it as a political issue, and see how they can improve as far as like being an ally and just being educated about things that are happening in the world, even if it doesn't impact them directly, and showing kindness to other people, tolerance and acceptance.
Yeah.
That's the space that at least our group is in.
Yeah. A lot of those issues, like you said, are just like human issues. They're not political issues, and they're issues of just safety of people, being in a community and feeling safe and feeling included within that community.
Yeah. The amount that I put into the group is way more than expected. Nobody expects this of me.
Right.
No one's asking of me. This is all my own choice. And then one of the reasons why inclusivity in space and safety is so important to me in space is that I want every person who comes and joins this community, we happen to be a Facebook group, but it's a community of people.
Yeah.
I want them to feel welcome. It doesn't matter where on their journey of plant collecting. They can either have been just started a week ago, yesterday, or have been collecting for years and years and years. Like this is an inclusive space for everybody.